Well, we did it. I did it, I guess. I did the 10 parts of the Feisty Manifesto. And I wrote about it, and then I reflected and vlogged about it, and this is the last one. It also happens to be the last one of the year. I didn't actually plan that, but it just worked out that way. It's been quite a week. Festivities ensue, a Christmas events, holiday parties, time with family. Overall, it's just been wonderful. But it's also been seasoned, let's say, by thinking about leading with fire. On Saturday last week, I posted the final installment and I talked about what it means for me to lead with fire and to continue to be feisty. I have always been seen as fiery. In fact, I think sometimes people think feisty means fiery, and although that isn't necessarily true, it certainly can mean that. And for most of my life, my feistiness has centered around perfectionism. It really hasn't been that long since I have come to recognize where the roots of my perfectionism have been. And I'm not suggesting that I don't have a desire to want to be perfect just born in me. Of course, I do. And that certainly exacerbated my traumatic childhood experience. But I shared about my traumatic childhood experience, not to, first of all, not to shame my parents who made the decision to put me in that ill-fated camp because at the time, I recognized what they were doing was attempting to support me, to encourage me, and to give me the tools to be a leader. And I recognize when you're a parent and you have small children, you want them to not just have fun and grow up, but you also want to inspire them and you want them to be well trained and well suited for the life they will live, not just the way they're living right then. So I completely released my parents from the liability of what happened. At the same time, I do carry the weight of that experience. And I didn't really think about it for most of my life because I think for people of a certain age like me, we we were never encouraged to think about our childhood as anything other than experiences that were filled with positive and negative that helped to make us who we were. Um, Thinking and reflecting upon emotions, that just wasn't done for someone of my age growing up. I remember needing to hide my emotions. I remember being encouraged to hide my emotions because it was not as socially acceptable to show them. And I recognize that that made me more vulnerable to traumas. And it also meant that I experienced that camp, and it did. It had an irreversible effect on my need to be perfect. What that camp is not responsible for, and my parents are not responsible for, and no situation is ever responsible for, is what I did with it. And I think as a child, yes, I didn't know. But I've had choices to make since then, and I could have chosen differently, and I didn't. I continued to leverage perfectionism. And I realized that I felt like being perfect could keep me safe, that I could um, think about how to control my environment to such an extent that I would be the master of my future, that I would always be in control. And I recognize that that is something I do need to take responsibility for. It doesn't mean that I deserved that experience or that it wasn't harmful. It's just that we all get to make choices with how we're going to behave. And I recognize that perfectionism for me actually formed a discipline, a way of living that I became vigilant about for myself. I put myself on that high standard to the extent that I also expected that of others, whether that was realistic or not. And on the inside of that perfectionism was always the fear that I would not measure up. And I didn't. Um, and I burned and had fire within me that kept me going, that kept me wanting to achieve, that kept me being compulsive. And it also put me in harm's way where exhaustion was something that I was used to. It was common, it was normal, it was natural. I always blamed myself. I continue very easily and quickly to blame myself. And I have a level of hyper responsibility. Partly, I suppose, because I'm an only child, but also because of that need to never be made to feel the shame that I was made to feel in that situation at that camp. What I've come to recognize is that the fire within me to achieve doesn't have to be attached to that perfectionism. It doesn't have to be attached to shame. It's actually not the problem. That the fire just needs to be understood and controlled and regulated. And my emotional intelligence journey has helped me understand how to regulate the fire because ultimately the fire is not the problem. The lack of regulation is and always was. So even though I didn't deserve to be treated that way, and that camp did a lot of damage to a lot of children, I have no doubt. The reality is that I have had the choice to turn that experience into something positive, and all it took was for me to look at myself and to think about how do I work through this vulnerability. And I didn't even have to remember that in order to make that choice, but for me that was helpful. It was helpful to have that aha moment where I went, oh, I know the roots of this came from here, and now I want to backtrack and I want to rewire and rework my experience because I don't want to feel like perfection means power. What I really want to do is recognize that the power, the true power that I possess is my presence. It's in my authenticity, it's in showing up, and it's in owning those moments. So, people think I'm fiery. The red hair, the dynamic look. I always have bright lipstick. I always have my nails done. I love to wear a ring on this hand. I've got some fiery, feisty kind of character traits. But you know what? I don't do this now because I'm trying to wave a flag and impress people. I do it because this is my authentic self. This is who I am. And I have a fire within me. That fire has been there all along. And that fire exists because I don't want to burn myself with my need to measure up to my own standards. I want that fire to actually be a tool and an instrument to help keep others warm, to think about how my need for perfectionism is actually something that other people also suffer with. And that if I tell my story and I show up and I'm present and authentic, that actually can be a gateway for others to have freedom from their own perfectionism, for their own desire to want to be something that they feel like maybe that they're not. I want my leadership to not be based on fear. I want it to be based on truth, by authenticity, by choice. And I want that fire to burn things, yes, but not to ruin or destroy, to reveal. I was thinking about this the other day. I was talking to someone and I gave the analogy of a crucible. I don't know if you know what a crucible is, but essentially, and I am not a scientist, but I did take science and I did take, in particular, labs and chemistry when I was in high school. And I remember burning elements in a crucible, which is essentially a burn-proof bowl. And the bowl itself can be heated up to incredibly high temperatures. And when you do that, the items on the inside of the bowl have the ability to heat up. And what happens is the heat purifies the natural substance. So I've seen this done with like silver and gold, like the elements, silver and gold, that when you heat this silver or gold or elements that have silver and gold in them, what happens is what burns away, I think they call it slag. What gets burnt away is the things that are yeah, unnecessary. And what you are left behind, what's left behind is this refined, in particular, silver or gold or precious metal. And I think the fire needs to be there to burn off those things. Sometimes it takes a feistiness to call something out, to say, hey, I see that, and I don't know that that's working for everyone in the room. It might be working for you, it may be working for a few, but that may not be working for everyone. That calling out takes fire, it takes guts, it takes energy, but it shouldn't be to destroy. It should be so that we can see things in a different perspective. And that gives hope and opportunity for us to work together to change, to make sure that all voices are heard. So I do want to lead with fire, but I don't want it to be motivated out of my fear to be perfect. And that's why I want to shift my way forward, to think about what it means to scorch, excuse me, to not scorch, but to spark innovation, to not burn things away because those things were valuable, but to burn things away that didn't serve myself and didn't serve others anyway. Um, to think about that fire as a torch, as a light that helps me remember that the fire itself is not about perfection for me. It's about lighting my own way. It's about casting the light onto the path in front of me. And so that I can continue to walk worthy and that others can walk along with me worthy of what it means to be feisty. So I hope that that's been helpful. I've got lots of things that I'm thinking about for 2026. I will see you then. But for now, I'm going to sign off and say thank you for the journey. Thank you for caring enough to listen and to watch and look for my podcast. The Feisty Project podcast will be back for season 2 in 2026. We'll be starting probably earlier. It looks like maybe a early January release. And that podcast will run for another season, 28 episodes. Looking forward to it. And we will see you all in 2026. Have a wonderful, safe holiday, and we will see you in the new year.